I'm dead.
What about Black Panther 2? Anything?
I'm
you can
dead.
No, we're not ready for you to be dead, Chadwick.
But I am. I'm dead.
August 28th, 2020. March 31st, 2019. February 11th, 2012. Do you remember where you were on those dates? Because millions of people do. Those were the days the world stopped to mourn legends. Days when social media exploded with disbelief. Days when strangers cried together because it felt like we all lost family. Today, we're talking about 15 deaths that absolutely shattered Hollywood. 1. Chadwick Boseman.
Actor Chadwick Boseman died at the age of 43 following a private 4-year battle with colon cancer.
We have to start with the one that absolutely broke the internet and shattered millions of hearts worldwide. August 28, 2020. That's the day the world lost Chadwick Boseman, and honestly, none of us saw it coming. The man was only 43 years old, and he kept his battle with colon cancer completely private for 4 years. 4 years! Can you imagine the strength that took? Chadwick wasn't just an actor, he was a superhero in every sense of the word. He gave us King T'Challa in Black Panther, a role that meant everything to the black community and to Marvel fans everywhere. That movie wasn't just a blockbuster, it was a cultural phenomenon. Kids finally had a superhero who looked like them. Adults saw themselves represented in ways Hollywood had never done before. And Chadwick carried that responsibility with so much grace and power. But here's what gets me every single time. While he was fighting cancer, going through chemotherapy, and dealing with everything that comes with that brutal disease, he was still showing up on set. He filmed Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and several other movies, all while battling stage 3 and stage 4 colon cancer. He never complained. He never made it about himself. He just kept giving us these incredible performances. His co-stars had no idea. Ryan Coogler, the director of Black Panther, didn't know. Lupita Nyong'o didn't know. Nobody knew what he was going through. And when that announcement came from his family's Twitter account, the entire world stopped. The post became one of the most liked tweets in Twitter history. Tributes poured in from everywhere, from his Marvel family, from political leaders, from fans across the globe. 2. Paul Robeson.
Since arisen in our world, perhaps were present then. First, I would say that here is a part which has dignity for the Negro actor. Often we don't get those opportunities.
Let's rewind the clock and talk about a man who was doing amazing things long before Hollywood was ready for him. Paul Robeson died on January 23, 1976, at the age of 77. But his story is one that every person needs to know. This man wasn't just an actor. He was an athlete, a lawyer, a singer, an activist, and honestly, he was too powerful for his own time. Paul Robeson was a Renaissance man in the truest sense. He played professional football, graduated from Columbia Law School, became an internationally celebrated singer with one of the most distinctive bass voices you've ever heard, and starred in movies and plays that challenged racial stereotypes. His performance in the film The Emperor Jones in 1933 was groundbreaking, and his portrayal of Othello on Broadway ran for nearly 300 performances, which was unheard of at that time. But here's where things get really interesting and really dark. Paul Robeson wasn't afraid to speak his mind about racism, inequality, and injustice. During the Cold War era, he became a target of the U.S. government because of his political views and his sympathies towards socialism. The FBI kept files on him. His passport was revoked for 8 years, which destroyed his international career. He was blacklisted in Hollywood. This man went from being one of the most celebrated performers in the world to being essentially erased from American entertainment. The stress, the persecution, the constant surveillance, it took a massive toll on his mental and physical health. He suffered from depression and went through periods of serious illness. By the time he died in 1976, many younger people didn't even know who he was, even though he had paved the way for every black actor who came after him. His death shocked those who remembered his glory days because it reminded them of how America had treated one of its most talented sons. 3. Nipsey Hussle.
We playing a long game. We don't want the money to stop when we go. When we can't work no more, we want it to outlive us. We want it to be generational.
March 31st, 2019. If you were anywhere near social media that day, you remember exactly where you were when you heard the news. Nipsey Hussle, born Ermias Osgedem, was shot and killed outside his own clothing store in South Los Angeles. He was only 33 years old, and his death sent shockwaves not just through the music industry, but through Hollywood and communities across America. Now you might be thinking, wait, Nipsey was a rapper, not an actor. And you're right, but his influence on Hollywood and his crossover into film and television made him very much a part of that world. He had been working on a documentary. He was involved in various film projects, and his story was one that Hollywood was paying very close attention to. Plus, his relationship with actress Lauren London connected him even more deeply to the entertainment industry. What made Nipsey's death so shocking wasn't just that it was violent and senseless, it was that he was killed while trying to do good in his community. This man was investing in his neighborhood, creating jobs, opening businesses, and working on programs to help kids stay out of gangs. He was literally standing outside Marathon Clothing, a store he owned in the same neighborhood where he grew up when he was murdered. The killer was someone from the same community. The irony is devastating. Here was a man who had made it out, who could have left and never looked back, but instead chose to pour millions back into Crenshaw. He was working with the LAPD to discuss ways to reduce gang violence. He was a father, a partner to Lauren London, and a role model showing young black men that there was another way. And then, in broad daylight, on a Sunday afternoon, he was taken away from us. 4. Sidney Poitier.
CNN has confirmed that the legendary actor and director and longtime activist Sidney Poitier has died at the age of 94.
January 6, 2022. This one hit different because we knew Sidney Poitier had lived a long, full life. He was 94 years old, but his death still shocked the world because, quite frankly, it felt like he would live forever. This man was more than a Hollywood legend. He was the legend, the one who kicked down doors that had been locked shut for black actors for decades. Sidney Poitier became the first black man to win the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1964 for his role in Lilies of the Field. Let me repeat that. The first black man to win Best Actor. In 1964. Think about how late that was and how long black actors had been working in Hollywood. That win wasn't just about Sidney. It was about every black actor who came before him and every black actor who would come after. It was a moment that changed the industry forever. But Sidney didn't just win an Oscar and call it a day. He starred in some of the most important films in American cinema. In The Heat of the Night, where he played Virgil Tibbs and delivered that legendary line, "They call me Mr. Tibbs. Guess who's coming to dinner?" which tackled interracial marriage at a time when it was still illegal in many states. A Raisin in the Sun, which brought the black family experience to mainstream audiences. Every role he chose had meaning, had purpose, had dignity. What shocked people about his death wasn't just losing the man. It was feeling like we lost a whole era of Hollywood. Sidney represented a time when black actors had to be twice as good, twice as dignified, twice as perfect to get half the recognition. He carried himself with such class and elegance that he made it impossible for Hollywood to ignore black talent. He never played stereotypes. He never took roles that demeaned his people. He understood that every character he played represented millions of black people who rarely saw themselves on screen. 5. Michael Clarke Duncan.
The gentle giant is gone. Michael Clarke Duncan is best known for his role in The Green Mile.
He died yesterday after nearly 2 months of treatment following a heart attack.
September 3, 2012. When news broke that Michael Clarke Duncan had died at age 54, Hollywood was stunned. This gentle giant of a man, who stood 6'5" and had a voice that rumbled like thunder, had suffered a heart attack just weeks earlier. His fiancée at the time, Omarosa Manigault, found him unresponsive and performed CPR that actually saved his life initially. But after nearly 2 months of fighting in the hospital, his heart gave out, and we lost one of the most unique presences in Hollywood. Michael Clarke Duncan's story is one of those Hollywood dreams that seem almost too good to be true. Before he became an actor, he was working as a bodyguard. He protected celebrities like Will Smith, Jamie Foxx, and Notorious B.I.G. He was literally guarding the stars, watching them work, learning the business from the outside, and dreaming that maybe one day he could be on the other side of that camera. And then he got his shot. His breakthrough role as John Coffey in The Green Mile wasn't just a performance. It was a masterclass in acting. Playing a death row inmate with supernatural healing powers. Who is gentle, kind, and innocent, Michael brought so much humanity and heartbreak to that role that he earned an Academy Award nomination. When he cried on screen, you cried with him. When he said, "I'm tired, boss," you felt that exhaustion in your soul. That role should have led to him becoming one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. And while he worked consistently after that, he never quite got the leading man opportunities he deserved. What made Michael's death so shocking was how sudden it was. Yes, 54 is not young, but it's not old either. He was still working, still in demand, and seemed to have years of great performances ahead of him. Heart disease is the leading killer of black men in America, and Michael's death put a spotlight on that fact. His size, which had been his trademark, and his ticket to Hollywood might have also contributed to the strain on his heart. After his death, his friends and colleagues all shared the same sentiment. He was one of the kindest people in Hollywood. Despite his imposing size, he was gentle, generous, and always had time for fans. Tom Hanks, who worked with him on The Green Mile, called him a gift. 6. Bernie Mac.
Actor, comedian Bernard McCullough died early Saturday morning at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago.
August 9, 2008. This is one of those deaths that felt completely wrong because Bernie Mac was only 50 years old and seemed like he was just hitting his peak. The man had the kind of comedy career most people only dream about. He'd conquered stand-up, television, and movies, and his death from complications of pneumonia shocked everyone who loved his work. Bernie Mac, born Bernard Jeffrey McCullough, came up the hard way through Chicago's comedy scene. He wasn't an overnight success. He grinded for years, performing in small clubs, working his way up, perfecting his craft. And when he finally got his break, he made sure everyone knew who Bernie Mac was. His appearance on Def Comedy Jam became legendary. That performance put him on the map and showed Hollywood that this man had something special, a commanding presence, perfect timing, and a fearlessness that made him impossible to ignore. The Bernie Mac Show was groundbreaking television. Playing a fictional version of himself raising his sister's 3 kids, Bernie brought real heart and real comedy to a show that dealt with serious family issues. He talked to the camera, breaking the fourth wall in a way that made you feel like he was your uncle, telling you about his crazy day. The show won Emmy Awards, and Bernie himself became a household name. Then came movies like Ocean's 11, Friday, and Transformers, where he showed he could hold his own with the biggest stars in Hollywood. But here's what a lot of people didn't know. Bernie had been dealing with sarcoidosis, an inflammatory disease that affects the lungs, for years. He kept working despite his health issues because that's just who he was. In 2008, he contracted pneumonia, and because his immune system was already compromised by sarcoidosis, his body couldn't fight it off. He spent weeks in the hospital, and just when it seemed like he might pull through, his condition worsened. When he died, his family released a statement saying he passed peacefully with his family by his side, but there was nothing peaceful about losing Bernie Mac. 7. Whitney Houston.
Out of Los Angeles, the death of singing star Whitney Houston at the age of 48.
February 11th, 2012, the day before the Grammy Awards. Whitney Houston was found dead in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and the news hit like an earthquake. She was 48 years old, and while people knew she had struggled with addiction for years, her death still shocked the world because Whitney was supposed to make a comeback. She was supposed to beat her demons. She was supposed to be the survivor story. Instead, we got a tragedy. Whitney Houston wasn't primarily known as an actress, but her role in The Bodyguard opposite Kevin Costner was massive. That movie made over $400 million worldwide, and the soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums of all time. Her cover of I Will Always Love You became the love song for an entire generation. She also starred in Waiting to Exhale and The Preacher's Wife, showing that she could act as well as she could sing. Hollywood loved Whitney, and she seemed destined for a long career in both music and film. But addiction is a monster that doesn't care about talent, fame, or money. Whitney's struggles with were public and painful to watch. Her marriage to Bobby Brown was tumultuous and widely covered by the media. Her voice, once the most powerful and pure in music, became damaged from years of substance abuse. People who loved her watched helplessly as she struggled, hoping that each attempt at rehab would be the one that stuck. The circumstances of her death were devastating. She drowned in the bathtub with heart disease and use listed as contributing factors. The coroner ruled it an accidental drowning. Here was a woman with everything: talent, beauty, fame, wealth, and none of it could save her from the disease of addiction. The night she died, music executives were setting up for pre-Grammy parties at the same hotel. The next day, the Grammy Awards went on as scheduled, but the ceremony became a tribute to Whitney. 8. Cicely Tyson.
I was thinking to myself, what are the factors that lead someone to have this type of longevity in a career like this?
January 28, 2021. Cicely Tyson died at the age of 96, having lived a full, remarkable life. But her death still shocked Hollywood because she had just released her memoir 2 days earlier. 2 days. She had been doing interviews, promoting her book, sharing her story, and seemed as vibrant as ever. And then she was gone, leaving the world to wonder if she had been saying goodbye all along. Cicely Tyson was royalty in Hollywood, plain and simple. Her career spanned over 7 decades. And in that time, she never compromised, never took roles that demeaned black women, and never stopped pushing for better representation. She won 3 Emmys, a Tony Award, and an honorary Oscar. She was a Kennedy Center honoree and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. These weren't just participation trophies. These were recognitions of a career spent breaking barriers and setting standards. Her role in Sounder earned her an Academy Award nomination in 1972, making her one of the first black women to be nominated for Best Actress. She played Coretta Scott King, Harriet Tubman's mother, and countless other strong black women who reflected the dignity and strength she saw in her own mother and community. In the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, she played a woman who aged from a young slave to a one 10-year-old civil rights era witness, and she did it so convincingly that people actually believed Miss Jane Pittman was a real person. What made Cicely Tyson different was her integrity. In an era when black actresses were offered maid roles and stereotypes, she said no. She went years without working rather than play characters that degraded her people. She understood that representation mattered, that images on screen shaped how people viewed black women, and she refused to be part of the problem. That kind of courage and conviction is rare in any era, but in her time, it was almost unheard of. When she died, the tributes were immediate and heartfelt. Oprah, Tyler Perry, Viola Davis, Zendaya, black actresses across generations spoke about how Cicely had paved the way for them. Her death shocked people because, even at 96, she seemed eternal. She had survived so much, broken so many barriers, and lived to see the industry she helped transform. 9. Heavy D.
Sadly, rap legend Heavy D died nearly 9 years ago at the age of 44, but tonight, his fans and other rap pioneers are keeping his memory alive.
November 8, 2011. Heavy D, born Dwight Arrington Myers, died at his home in Los Angeles, and the hip-hop and entertainment world was stunned. He was only 44 years old, and like Bernie Mac and Michael Clark Duncan, his death was caused by issues related to his weight and heart health. But what made his death particularly shocking was that he had just performed at the BET Hip Hop Awards less than 2 weeks earlier and seemed fine. Heavy D was a pioneer in hip-hop, bringing a positive, party-friendly energy to rap at a time when the genre was getting increasingly hardcore. He and his group, Heavy D and the Boys, had massive hits in the late 80s and early 90s, and Heavy was one of the first rappers to successfully cross over into acting. He appeared on A Different World, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and even had a recurring role on Boston Public. He was charismatic, talented, and seemed to have a bright future in both music and acting. The circumstances of his death were particularly tragic. He had been shopping and came home complaining of trouble breathing. He collapsed on his walkway, and by the time paramedics arrived, he was in bad shape. He died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The autopsy revealed he died from a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in his lung, which was caused by deep vein thrombosis, likely from his weight. He also had heart disease. Here was a man in his 40s, seemingly healthy on the outside, but dealing with serious health issues that killed him suddenly and without warning. Heavy D's death sent shockwaves because he represented the fun, positive side of hip-hop. He wasn't involved in beef, he wasn't controversial. He was just a talented guy who loved music and making people happy. His death at such a young age reminded the hip-hop community and Hollywood that health issues don't discriminate, and that the lifestyle that comes with success, the traveling, the stress, the neglect of physical health, can have deadly consequences. 10. Sherman Hemsley.
I have a passing to note about someone who changed cultural history in this country. Sherman Hemsley has died at the age of 74.
July 24, 2012. Sherman Hemsley died alone in his El Paso, Texas home, and when the news broke, it shocked people for multiple reasons. First, because Sherman was George Jefferson, one of the most iconic characters in television history. And it seemed impossible that such a larger-than-life presence was gone. But second, because the circumstances surrounding his death and what came after were absolutely bizarre. Sherman Hemsley played George Jefferson on The Jeffersons for 11 seasons, creating a character that became a cultural touchstone. George Jefferson was brash, funny, successful, and unapologetically black. The show dealt with race, class, and social issues in ways that were groundbreaking for the 70s and 80s. Sherman's comic timing, his physical comedy, and his chemistry with Isabel Sanford, who played his wife Louise, made the show required viewing. That strut, that voice, those one-liners. Sherman created something that will live forever in television history. But here's where things got really shocking. After Sherman died, his body couldn't be buried for months because of a legal battle over his estate. A man claiming to be his half-brother wanted to get a DNA test to prove his relationship before the body was buried, hoping to claim part of the estate. Meanwhile, a business partner claimed Sherman wanted to be cremated, while others said he wanted to be buried. For 4 months, Sherman Hemsley's body was kept in refrigeration while lawyers fought in court. It was undignified, it was sad, and it was shocking that an icon could be treated this way, even in death. When they finally buried him in November 2012, it was a small ceremony, nothing like what a television legend deserved. The legal battles over his estate continued even after that. It turned out Sherman had died with very little money, despite decades of success. Apparently, he had some financial troubles and hadn't worked much in recent years. The man who played one of television's most successful businessmen had struggled financially in real life. 11. John Singleton.
He is the youngest director ever nominated for an Oscar for the groundbreaking Boys in the Hood. Singleton died after suffering a stroke. He's being remembered across Hollywood.
April 29, 2019. John Singleton suffered a stroke and was taken off life support at age 51. And Black Hollywood mourned the loss of one of its greatest directors. John wasn't an actor, but his impact on black actors and black storytelling in film was so massive that his death absolutely shocked the industry. This was the man who gave us Boys and the Hood, who became the first black director nominated for Best Director at the Oscars, and who launched the careers of countless black actors. John Singleton was only 24 years old when he wrote and directed Boys and the Hood, and that film changed everything. It gave us Ice Cube as an actor, showed Cuba Gooding Jr.'s dramatic range, and told a story about young black men in South Central Los Angeles with honesty, depth, and humanity that Hollywood had never seen before. That movie wasn't just entertainment. It was education. It was social commentary. It was art. And John did it as a film school kid making his first movie. After Boys in the Hood, John continued making important films: Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson and Tupac, Higher Learning, Rosewood, Baby Boy, and Too Fast, Too Furious. He also directed episodes of television shows and was working on a project about the Los Angeles uprising of 1992 when he died. He was still creating, still telling stories, still fighting for black representation in Hollywood. What made John's death so shocking was how sudden it was. He had just returned from a trip to Costa Rica when he suffered a massive stroke. His family initially thought he might recover, but after being in a coma for nearly 2 weeks, they made the heartbreaking decision to take him off life support. The news hit the entertainment industry like a bomb. Tributes came from everyone: actors he'd worked with, directors he'd inspired, studios that had benefited from his vision. John Singleton's death was shocking because he was only 51 and seemed to have so much more to give. He had been advocating for more diversity behind the camera, mentoring young black filmmakers, and pushing for stories that reflected the real experiences of black people. His death reminded us that strokes can happen to anyone, that black men face particular health challenges, and that we can't take our artists for granted. The directors who came after him, Ryan Coogler, Ava DuVernay, Barry Jenkins, all stood on John Singleton's shoulders, and his death left a hole in black cinema that can never be filled. 12. Natina Reed.
Baby, we're going to try to celebrate this as best we can, so let me try if I can get you to tell us.
October 26, 2012. If you grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, you remember Black, the girl group that gave us hits like 808 and Bring It All to Me. Natina Reed was 1/3 of that group, and she also had a memorable role in the movie Bring It On as one of the Clovers, the cheerleading squad that gets ripped off by the Toros. She was talented, beautiful, and seemed to be building a promising career. Then, 2 days before her 33rd birthday, she was struck by a car and killed in Atlanta. The circumstances of Natina's death were shocking and tragic. She was crossing the street in Atlanta when a car hit her. The driver stayed at the scene and cooperated with the police, and there was no indication of alcohol or being involved. It was ruled an accident, just a horrible, senseless accident. One moment she was crossing the street, and the next moment she was gone. Her young son, whom she shared with rapper Kurupt, lost his mother in the blink of an eye. What made Natina's death particularly shocking to the entertainment community was that she had been working on a comeback. Black had broken up years earlier, and she had struggled with some personal issues, but she was trying to get her career back on track. She had been performing, recording new music, and reconnecting with fans. People who knew her said she was in a good place, excited about the future, and ready to remind people why they fell in love with her talent in the first place. Her funeral was attended by fellow artists and friends from the Atlanta music scene. Left Eye's mother was there, which was significant because Lisa Left Eye Lopes had been instrumental in Black's success, discovering and mentoring the group through TLC's production company. The fact that Natina died in a car accident just like Left Eye had years earlier was a painful irony that wasn't lost on anyone. 13. Robin Harris.
What's a goddamn shame?
Sweet Willie.
That's my name?
Damn, man, do I have to spell it out? On my make it plain.
March 18, 1990. Robin Harris died of a heart attack at age 36, and the comedy world lost one of its brightest rising stars. If you're younger, you might not know Robin Harris, but trust me, this man was a legend in the making. He was the host at the Comedy Act Theater in Los Angeles, which was basically where all the black comedians performed. He created the character BB's Kids, which later became an animated movie, and he had small but memorable roles in films like Do the Right Thing and House Party. Robin Harris was that dude. His comedy was sharp, observational, and hilarious. He talked about everyday life in the black community with a perspective that was both loving and brutally honest. He could talk about going to the swap meet, dealing with people's kids, or getting his hair cut, and make it the funniest thing you'd ever heard. He had a distinctive style, a commanding stage presence, and was on the verge of becoming a major star. Major studios were interested in him, and he was about to break through to mainstream success. Then, at 36 years old, his heart gave out. Just like that, Robin Harris was gone. He had been performing the night before, doing what he loved, making people laugh. He went home, went to sleep, and never woke up. The shock of his death reverberated through the comedy community because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not to Robin, not when he was so close to making it big. What made Robin's death particularly impactful was the timing. He had just finished filming House Party and Mo Better Blues, two movies that would have elevated his profile significantly. House Party became a huge hit, and Robin's performance as Pop, the father trying to stop his son from going to the party, was one of the highlights. People who saw the movie fell in love with him, but by the time it hit theaters, he was gone. He never got to see himself become a movie star. The animated film BB's Kids was made after his death as a tribute to his most famous comedy routine. It wasn't a huge success, but it ensured that Robin's creation lived on. Robin Harris's death shocked people because it showed how quickly everything can be taken away. He worked for years to make it in comedy, finally got his shot, and didn't live long enough to enjoy the success he earned. 14. Meshach Taylor.
Actor Meshach Taylor has died of cancer. His agent says Taylor died at his home near Los Angeles Saturday,
June 28, 2014. Meshach Taylor died from colorectal cancer at his home in Los Angeles, surrounded by his wife and children. He was 67 years old, and while that's a more typical age for someone to pass, his death still shocked fans who had grown up watching him on Designing Women and Dave's World. But what really got people was finding out that he had been diagnosed with cancer and chose not to publicize it, preferring to spend his final days in peace with his family. Meshach Taylor was one of those actors who seemed to be everywhere in the 80s and 90s. He played Anthony Bouvier on Designing Women for 7 seasons, and his character was groundbreaking, a smart, talented black man working in an interior design firm in the South, dealing with issues of race and class with humor and dignity. He wasn't a stereotype, he wasn't the sidekick. He was a fully realized character, and Meshack brought warmth and depth to the role. After designing women, he starred in Dave's World and had a memorable role in Mannequin as the flamboyant Hollywood Montrose. That role in particular showed his range. He could do physical comedy, he could be outrageously funny, and he could steal scenes from the leads. He also did tons of voice work for animated shows and had guest appearances on countless television series. He was a working actor, always employed, always bringing his A game. What shocked people about Meshack's death was learning that he had been sick and chose to keep it private. In an era where every celebrity illness becomes public knowledge, where people announce their diagnoses on social media and take fans along on their cancer journeys, Meshack did the opposite. He got his diagnosis, he fought his battle, and he did it with his family, away from cameras and public attention. When he died, his family released a simple statement, and that was it. 15. Chris Lighty, August.
Lighty is going to have a devastating impact on the music industry. He was one of the people, one of the pioneers of this whole phenomenon.
30th, 2012. Chris Lighty, the legendary hip-hop manager who guided the careers of 50 Cent, Diddy, J. Rule, Mariah Carey, and countless others, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his Bronx apartment. He was 44 years old, and his death sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community and Hollywood because this was a man who seemed to have everything figured out. He was successful, respected, connected, and yet he was suffering in ways that nobody saw. Chris Lighty co-founded Violator Management and built it into one of the most powerful management companies in hip-hop. He wasn't just booking shows and negotiating contracts. He was building brands, creating business empires, and helping artists become moguls. He understood that hip-hop wasn't just music. It was fashion, liquor, technology, film, and more. He helped 50 Cent build his empire beyond music, getting him deals with Vitamin Water and other brands that made him wealthy beyond his album sales. On the day he died, Chris had been arguing with his ex-wife about financial issues. They were divorced, but still living in the same apartment building, and they had been having money problems despite his years of success. Neighbors heard arguing, then they heard a gunshot. When police arrived, Chris was dead. The medical examiner ruled it a self-harm, though his mother insisted for years that she didn't believe her son would take his own life. The shock of Chris Lighty's death went beyond just the fact that he died. It was about what his death represented. Here was a black man who had made it to the top of a tough industry, who had helped shape hip-hop culture, who had money and status and respect, and he still couldn't escape the demons of depression, financial stress, and personal problems. His death sparked conversations about mental health in the black community, about the pressure that successful black men face to always appear strong, and about the importance of asking for help. Which of these deaths shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you learned something today, if any of these stories moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.